Okay, we're getting started. This is the meeting of the Committee of Economic and Community Development. And I'm going to go down the list for the members of the committee. I'm Vice President, Councilwoman Sharon Green Middleton, Chair of the committee and representative of the 6th District. We also have Councilman John Bullock, member of the committee representing the 9th District.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
We also have Mark Conway, member of the committee and representative of the 4th District.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
We also have member of the committee and representative of the 3rd District, Councilman Ryan Dorsey.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
We also have member of the committee and representative of the 13th District, and he'll be joining us shortly, Councilman Glover. We also have member of the committee, representative of the 14th District, Councilwoman Odette Ramos.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
We also have member of the committee and representative of the 12th District, Councilman Robert Stokes.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
And just a quick check to see if we have just any other visiting council members, which I don't see to recognize at this time. We also have members of the Office of the President, Mr. Matt Stegman.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
And we also have a member of the Office of the President, Ms. Nikki Thompson.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
And I was checking to see if there's, and we also have Aaron DeGraffrey, the General Counsel for the Office of the President and members of the Council.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good afternoon.
And representing the Mayor's Office, looking down the list, we have Nina Thimulus.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
And I was checking, I think you're it for the Mayor's Office.
That is correct.
Okay. This afternoon, the committee will have a hearing for Bill number 210008, and it's city property naming the playground in Northwest Park located at 2027 West Rogers Avenue to be the Rochelle Ricky Spector Playground for the purpose of naming the playground in Northwest Park located at 2027 West Rogers Avenue and approximately 100 feet from the street to be the Ricky Spector Playground. This bill was introduced on January 11th, 2021. The bill was sponsored by Councilman Isaac Yitzi Slifer, and checking to see if Councilman Slifer is on, and he's not on. So I would like to say I am just so excited that this park is named after Councilwoman Spector. I had an opportunity to work with her really in my first 2 terms. She was representative of the 5th District, and of course, the 5th District lies directly next to the 6th District. We have been partners. She has been a mentor when I started, and Councilwoman Spector was a person that really helped you to understand the importance of relationships and that's how you're going to be successful as a council person, and just the relationships that you have within your community, with your community presidents. I mean, she just had a wonderful relationship with really the whole Northwest corridor, even before it became single member districts. Very involved in every aspect of community development, and just so excited that, with her also being the longest serving elected official in the state of Maryland. She was also a president of the Maryland Association of Counties and brought me into the fold. So I'm sure so many people that know Councilwoman Spector just can say some wonderful things, and the love that she has for this city and for the constituency and for just about every elected official in the state of Maryland knows Councilwoman Spector, and she has worked hard to support them and continues to work hard even through her retirement. So I'm going to stop there and go with we're going to hear from the agency representatives at this point, and we'll start with the Department of Recreation and Parks. And who do we have as a representative for the Department of Recreation and Parks? Is anyone on for Rec and Parks? Don't see anyone from Rec and Parks, but they did turn in their report of a favorable report with an amendment, or is it amended with an amendment? And for the committee, the amendments are in the packet. Also, the Planning Commission did a favorable report. Go ahead, Lori, you're going to speak.
Yes. Thank you, Madam Chair, and I'm honored to be here speaking for this particular naming. I had the privilege of working with Councilwoman Spector for, let's say, many of those 40 years in her time in council. This particular playground is also special for those who have never been there. It's a 3,000 square foot playground, brand new, equipment that was put in with the Pimlico Local Impact Aid. And but one of the things that makes it quite special is it's located directly on the Drones Falls Trail, the hiker-biker trail. And you can, when you drive on Northern Parkway, you see the bridge now that's recently completed that connects this park and playground all the way to downtown Baltimore. Making that quite special. In addition to all the other, noted achievements of Councilwoman Spector, she also served on our Planning Commission for many, many years as the council's representative. We had our hearing on February 4th. On this bill, and it was a wonderful, wonderful hearing with unanimous, many of the commissioners, of course, worked with her, and unanimous vote in favor of this bill. We do have two amendments. One is to make sure the name is properly done as Rochelle Ricky Spector, as opposed to the way it was introduced. And the other is to correct the address of the park itself and confirm that with Recreation and Parks, but our records show that it's 2021, not 2027.
Okay.
So with that, we very excitedly support City Council Bill 210008.
Thank you, Lori. The Department of Finance, do we have a representative from Finance?
Good afternoon.
Is that Pedro?
Mara
I'm
James
sorry.
here for Finance.
Oh, hi, Mara.
Hi, how are you doing?
I'm good.
Good. So we stand by our report. We do not oppose this legislation. Implementing this will be at minimal cost to the city.
All right. Thank you. The Law Department. Did I see Victor Tervala? Are you representing the Law Department on this one?
Madam Chair, this is Vic Turbulent. I think Elena is on, and I think it's probably her bill, but I don't think we have a problem as drafted.
I'm sorry. Elena, did you want to?
That's okay. It wasn't my bill either. It was Ashley Brown. She's unable to be here today, and I thought she's being covered by someone else, but then nevertheless, what Victor said is appropriate.
Okay. Thank you both. The Baltimore Development Corporation, were they supposed to turn in anything? Okay. No
Yep. Good
response.
afternoon, Madam Chair. Ira Cowler, Baltimore Development Corporation. We stand by our report in support of the bill.
Okay, we need could you send a copy to the committee of your favorable report?
Oh, certainly.
Not received, yeah. Thank you. Send that to the committee, Jennifer Coates,
Absolutely.
so we can have that as a part of our file. So they did submit a favorable report. At this point, are there any questions from the committee members to any of the agencies on this particular bill?
Yes, Madam Chair.
Yes, Councilman Dorsey, you have a question for one of the agencies?
Yeah, thank you. For the finance department, Mara, I know you noted just in your comments now, minimal cost to the city. I read your report. You made reference to a $252 typical cost for a metal sign from the produced by DOT. Is that what's typical in these kind of renaming, or is there something more than that is planned as somebody else?
May I speak to that?
Gladly.
Yes, you may.
There have been conversations between the Mount Washington Improvement Association and Recreation in Parks about funding a sign of the park design. I don't know if you've seen the beautiful green signs that the Parks Department has been doing around the city, and they have a large version for the large parks, and they have a small version for playgrounds. And they've been talking. It's not finalized yet, but I believe that is the goal of Parks Department as well as the community.
So it would be something, some cost that would be shared between the city and the community association.
That is my understanding. The details had not been worked out by our hearing time, but both sides said they were working on it.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Any other committee questions?
Madam Chair, it was mentioned that there were some amendments. Is the only one just the rename, the proper spelling of the name, or was there another one?
One was the address.
Oh, got it.
Any other questions? Okay, the committee will now take public testimony.
We can read this. You can go ahead and read it.
And we're going to have Jennifer, staff to the committee, read the rules for the next testimony.
Okay,
you have to unmute yourself. She's having a little technical difficulty, so let me go over. Committee staff will coordinate the public testimony. Please be patient. Use the raise hand function to indicate that you wish to testify. When called upon, each speaker must state their name for the record prior to testifying. Telephone users, attendees who call in cannot be identified by name and will be muted by committee staff one by one during the public testimony portion of the hearing. Attendees will hear 2 beeps when they are unmuted. If you do not wish to testify, please say so when you are unmuted. If you do wish to testify, please state your name for the record at the beginning of your testimony. If a speaker is inaudible, they will be directed to call back. And so we're going to start with, I see former Councilwoman Ricky Spector. I wonder if, Ricky, did you want to say some words before we move on to outside public testimony?
I can't wait for this to walk by and see the sign. I don't want to waste any time. I just want to thank you from the bottom of my heart for this great honor.
You're quite welcome. Okay, moving on to the public testimony.
So we have Bernadine Kimball. Would you like to speak? Bernadine
Right.
Kimball, would you like to speak?
Yes.
Go right ahead.
Okay. I would like to speak on another what's on the table, but not what this is this is on the what's on the table right now.
Okay.
Okay,
We'll get back to
I
you.
would like to speak.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Garrett Good. Mr. Garrett Good.
Eden, I'm
Madam
watching the
Chair, I
hearing.
want my comments for the investigative hearing for the Affordable Housing Trust Fund.
If you have your hand raised, it should be just raised for the bill that we are speaking of now.
Okay, my apologies.
Okay. Hold on a minute. Okay, that takes care of the computer users. I'll go through the telephone users. Hello, would you like to speak?
Madam Chair, we have a couple of people with their microphones unmuted.
Can you please, everyone, mute your microphones? We only want the people that are going to speak to unmute.
Okay, they don't want to speak. Hold on a minute. Mr. Presley, would you like to speak on Bill 21-0008?
No, ma'am, but thank you for asking me. I'm just very excited to be attending your meeting. I do have a staff person that will be speaking later on the affordable housing bill, but it's just good to see everybody, and thank you for the opportunity.
Councilman Glover. Okay, I'm going down the list. Miss Lena Leon, would you like to speak?
Thank you.
Miss Nancy Newman, would you like to speak on Bill 21-008?
Thank you.
Okay. That's it.
Thank you for your patience. It looks like we went down the list just for this particular bill. So we did have, for the committee, we did have an amendment, those two amendments to consider for this bill. Is there a motion to move the amendments?
So moved.
So moved by Councilman Ramos and second by Councilman Conway.
Walt Horton, the doctor, give me a call back. 410
Excuse me.
15.
Mr. Walter Horton, please.
Excuse me, could you mute your phones, please, so we can move on? Okay, the amendment was moved by Councilwoman Ramos and second by Councilman Conway. I'm sorry. Chair Middleton, yes. Councilman Bullock. Councilman Bullock, do you vote for the amendment? We'll move on to Council.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Councilman Conway,
Yay.
Councilman Dorsey,
Yes.
Councilman Glover,
Yes.
Councilwoman Ramos,
Yes, Ramos, yes.
Ramos, thank you. And Councilman Stokes.
Yes.
Thank you. Is there a motion to move the bill as amended?
So moved.
Seconded.
Second,
So moved by, who was that moved?
Bullock.
Bullock.
Thank you.
Second by Conway.
Second by Conway. And so this bill, we're taking the vote to move favorable as amended. Chair Middleton, yes. Councilmember Bullock,
Yes.
yes. Councilmember Conway,
Yay.
yes. Councilmember Dorsey,
Yes.
Councilmember Glover,
Yes.
Councilmember Ramos,
Yes.
and Councilmember Stokes.
Yes.
Okay, this bill will be moved to second reader at the next council meeting. Thank you, Councilwoman Spector, and congratulations of the naming of this park named after you.
Thank you very much, committee, and thank you, Chair. And take the rest of the day off.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bill number 21-00021 is the next bill, late fees for past due rent, for the purpose of requiring the lease to have a provision regarding a 10-day grace period, requiring the lease to have provisions regarding the amount of money landlords may charge for late fees, when landlords may charge tenants receiving public assistance for late fees as a conditional precedent to the tenant's right to redeem, and the types of fees landlords may recover, and prohibiting this section from altering other remedies available to a landlord. This bill was introduced on January 11th, 2021. This bill was sponsored by Council Member Robert Stokes, and we'll start with comments from the sponsor. Council Member Stokes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I wanted to, this bill really helps during this pandemic, and also we found out that a lot of the residents, when they receive their rent due, their income is later, and we try to avoid the late fees that landlords charge, because it was a 5-day grace period. This actually had a 10-day grace period, but also was to make sure we don't add to our homelessness and eviction that's going on in the city. We know right now it's not happening because of the pandemic. So the idea was to reduce some of the late fees that landlords charge and add that 5-day grace period actually to a 10-day grace period. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Stokes. And now the committee will hear from the agency representatives. Please state your name, and we'll start with the city solicitor.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair. This is Vic Turveler for the City Law Department. I'm not certain if you have my law report. It's not listed on Legistar. I did send it in on Friday. But the gist of it is that there is one section of the original bill that we needed out because it conflicts with the public local law. I know that there's amendments to this bill, and we've looked at the amendments too. So if we're going to amend the bill, we're going to be fine with the amendments. But if we're going to stay with the original bill, what we're asking for is an amendment, basically a deletion of on page 2, at the very bottom of page 2 on paragraph 5, which talks about 3 judgments for possession in favor of the landlord. If you've had 3 negative judgments for possession, this gives you the right to redeem the property if you pay certain costs. That is in conflict with the public local law. So if we are staying with the original bill, we would have that paragraph 5 deleted. Other than that, the law department would approve the bill for form and legal sufficiency.
Thank you for your testimony. The Department of Housing and Community Development.
Hi, good afternoon, Madam Chair and members of the committee. Stephanie Murdoch, Legislative Liaison for the Baltimore City Department of Housing and Community Development, reporting on Council Bill 21-0021. DHCD stands by our report. We do not object to the passage of this legislation. Interestingly enough, State DHCD just released a long-awaited report this week for affirmative housing fair needs assessment. Affordable housing fair needs assessment. And it really highlighted what we already know, that many of Baltimore City's tenants are facing hardships and there's a lack of affordable housing. So this legislation may help limit some of the hardships that these tenants are facing, and we stand by our report.
Thank you. The Housing Authority of Baltimore City. Is there any representative?
Yes, good afternoon, Chairwoman Middleton. Bill Wells for the Housing Authority of Baltimore City. We submitted a report. It was submitted today, so I'm not sure if the committee has it or not. My apologies for that. In general,
no, they don't.
Okay.
No.
In general, HABC agrees with the intent of the relief, except for a few places. And mostly, and as the law department pointed out, page 2, paragraph 5, we noted that conflict. In addition, a lot of the procedures that the Public Housing Authority follows now are with the intent of this legislation. We cap late fees. First of all, HABC is not currently charging late fees for public housing residents. In addition, should we start charging those fees, they're capped at 5% currently after 5 days. In addition, HUD requires a 14-day period after notice is given. So essentially, were we to give notice of failure to pay on the 6th day, there would be a 14-day period for the tenant to pay rent before any action could be taken. In addition, there are several requirements about including and updating the lease that HABC uses. HABC uses a lease based on language specified by HUD for public housing. And so there are certain things that we can and certain things that we can't change about that lease. It's possible, depending on the way this legislation is finally amended, that we might be able to include provisions as an addendum to the lease, but would not be able to alter portions of the lease that were prohibited by HUD. And we just wanted to point that out. In HABC's standpoint, we believe that the protections afforded by HUD for renters in public housing, also in our HCV program, provide safeguards that don't exist for market tenants. And HABC would respectfully ask that, HABC would respectfully ask that HABC be exempted as a landlord from this legislation due to the procedures that we currently follow under HUD's guidelines for the properties that we're landlords. Again, my apologies that the full report didn't get to you. I'm happy to speak and address any specific questions or once council members have had a chance to look at the report to speak to them specifically.
I'm sure the committee will need time to look at the report, look at your provisions, and we're going to have to get back to you.
Certainly.
The Department of Real Estate. Walter Horton, I think. We're trying to unmute him now. Walter?
Yes.
Yes, hi, you're on.
Unfortunately, my report did not make it there either. However, we have no objections to the 10-day period. We do believe that this is going to be a tremendous aid for anybody that's experiencing any kind of hardship as a result of not just the virus, but even after the virus is over with. So we would support this legislation.
Okay.
Yes, I will
please make
send
sure.
it to you in writing.
Thank you so much. Send that to Jennifer, and she'll get it to all the committee members.
Madam Chair, real quick, can I say something?
And yes, Councilman Stokes.
We are hopefully, you know, this is my second term on the council, and every time we ask for a report, they always come late. And I hope with this new year, this new council, that don't keep, because this is important to the residents here in Baltimore City, and we want to make sure, because of the pandemic, that people don't really have to pay extra with these late fees. But I would like to see the agency, when we request a report, that we get them on time. It's the same old business as usual. This stuff is important, and we should be getting the reports on time, not just me. Any reports that this council requested when they doing the members, we should get the reports on time, and it's the same thing that's happening again. So to the agencies that don't have the report, I would appreciate it that we get the report right away, because it's not fair to the committee and the council. Thank you.
I totally agree with your statement, committee member and council member Stokes. I know Nina Thimulus is on for the mayor's office, and Nina, I hope you take this message back to the mayor and the legislative office to try to get these reports and talk with these agencies. We are introducing some very timely legislation. I also want to let the committee know that, and they are in your packet, so we did receive some communications, and some of these people are probably going to speak, but we did receive some communications from people that are in favorable or oppose this bill. We are going to listen to testimony, but I'm sure that the committee, because of some of these new occurring amendments, provisions, and some of the lateness of submitting these reports, will basically just delay our voting on this particular bill at this time. But we are going to, at this point, move to public testimony unless the committee at this time has a specific question to a specific agency. Are there any other questions to the agencies, or we can move on to testimony on this bill, bill number 21-00021, late fees for past due rent? We have a number of people on that I know want to speak, so only raise your hand if you want to speak on the late fees for past due rent. And we'll start with attendees. Bernadine Kimball?
Yes.
Is this the bill you'd like to speak on?
I like to speak on the late fees, yes.
Yes. Oh, okay. You have a couple minutes. Thank you.
Far as the paying late fees. I think it's like impossible for them to do that when they are backed up in their rent already. It should be that the late fees should be dismissed because of the pandemic. They can barely even eat here in Baltimore City, more or less pay their rent or to have add-on late fees. It's ridiculous that anyone would ask anybody to pay a late fee when their rent is backed up for 9 months or almost a year. Because I really believe if they had the money, they would pay it. We have to look at things in a way where it's humanity crying out for help. We need to, it's a human right to have a place to live. And with late fees, and they cannot all not be able to pay their rent, they're going to be outside. And I don't think that Baltimore wants to do that. I think Baltimore, we are geared here. If not, we are becoming geared for the humanitarian phase of Baltimore, a new Baltimore. We don't want to put people out on the street. We want to make it easy for us to be able to come back from the COVID virus pandemic. And adding on late fees and I'm hoping that we can come to a solution about the back rent. Please, with all my heart, I'm asking you to waiver this. I see this, if not every day, every other day. That they're just so grateful to get food, more or less when I ask, are you backed up in rent? And I say, how much or how long? And they say 9 months. That's a long time, but they haven't worked in 9 months and they're unable to get unemployment. So please look at this and look at it hard and long. I thank you for your time.
Thank you for
Madam
your
Chair.
comment. Council Member Stokes?
Yeah, I just want to clarify something real quick. The fees are currently stopped during the pandemic. This is for when the pandemic ends.
Exactly.
The late fees, families will need time to get their lives together even when this is over. So there is no late fees currently right now. It's already stopped because of the pandemic. This is after the pandemic. We got to make sure that, the family's we know they're going to be behind, but they need to get their lives together even when this is over. So I just want to be clear on that the late fees are not being charged now anyway. Thank you.
Madam Chair, may I ask a question?
Yes, you may.
Thank you.
Member Dorsey, you're recognized.
Thank you. Can the law department speak to this issue of late fees at the end of this state of emergency? I may need and maybe Matt Hill's on here. He may know also. I'm sure he does. Just for clarification, will landlords be able to charge a late fee, a whole stack of late fees for over the last year or whatever? Will they be able to add them on at the end of this state of emergency as amounts due?
Councilman, this is Vic Turbo from the Law Department. I don't know if I can tell you that late fees are allowed by state law. So at the end of the day, we can't ban them. But I don't know the answer to your question about whether or not they're going to be piled on at the end of the day.
And so would we have the power by ordinance to say that late fees that would have been incurred throughout the state of this emergency may not be collected at the end of the state of emergency?
I'm going to have to look at where about exactly what that is. Under the state of emergency, the governor has lots of authority, and that's where I bet this all is coming from. So we'd have to take a look at that.
Yeah, I mean,
Thank you. Thank you, Victor. Councilman Dorsey, I'm going to go ahead and see if since Matt Hill is on there, we're going to go ahead and let him through and see if he can also
Sure, thank you.
answer some of this. Matt, are you there?
I am, Madam Chair. Thank you. And members of the committee, thank you. Again, this is Matt Hill. I'm an attorney at the Public Justice Center. I just want to thank first Councilman Stokes, Council President's Office for bringing this important bill. I'm speaking here today on behalf of Baltimore Renters United participants, Public Justice Center, Jews United for Justice, Communities United, Bolton House Residents Association, United Workers, Beyond the Boundaries, Right to Housing Alliance, Green and Healthy Homes Initiative, and the Homeless Persons Representation Project, and you have our written testimony. This is important legislation. Before we lose Councilman Dorsey's thread, I just want to say my memory is when the emergency renter relief bill was introduced in the council. I think it was in April or May. That the intent was that landlords are not going to be allowed to charge those late fees after the end of the pandemic. So that was the intent, and that's what I believe was reflected in the language, but I haven't looked at that language in a long time. With respect to this bill on late fees, again, we're strongly in support with an amendment, and I understand I've worked with the council president's office on this amendment. I understand they've worked with the sponsor, Councilman Stokes, on the amendment. And the amendment would simply clarify that there's a number of things the bill does, and I think the amendments just clarify exactly what I understood the intent to be, which is, again, a mandatory 10-day grace period. And then if the tenant's receiving a monthly government benefit, this is particularly important in the case of folks getting SSI or SSDI. We see this a lot. They're getting these payments in their very limited income, often seniors or persons with disabilities, in the middle of the month. And what happens is they're getting charged that late fee every month, and they simply cannot afford it. And so this provision in the bill says that if you're getting that benefit, the landlord has to offer the tenant a 10-day grace period starting from the date the benefit is paid or mailed. Something that I think a number of people referenced earlier is just the scale of the affordability crisis that the city's facing. According to the city's consolidated plan, 32,000 very low income renter households in the city are paying more than 50% of their monthly income toward the rent. So just taking a typical family of four that's earning $2,200 per month, if they're paying $1,300 in rent, then they only have $900 to cover food, utility, transportation, clothes. The math just doesn't work. And so a 5% late fee on top of that $1,300 payment is an additional $65 that residents just don't have. That $65 is on top of the $30 court costs and the agent fees that landlords often also charge right now on the 6th of the month. So this is important relief for those families who are truly living on the edge of affordability. And I just want to emphasize the scale of how many families, 32,000 families, are in that category. So this bill, as amended, would provide some common sense relief to families who need it the most and further help balance the scales of the landlord-tenant relationship. And I really appreciate the council's time. I'm happy to take any questions, but I just want to emphasize again that we really are focused on those amendments, because without the amendments, there are a number of other things in the original draft that we are concerned about.
Thank you, Mayor. You just admitted your testimony not too long ago, so I'm sure the committee will review that as well. Councilman Dorsey, did you finish, or you had another question?
I just wanted, since I had raised the issue, I wanted to just close this up. I went back and read Council Bill 200526 from, as Matt said, April of 2020, and it does in fact prohibit the collection of any late fees that would have been incurred during this state of emergency. So I got that answer. Thank you.
Thank you. So we'll move on. Any other questions from the committee at this point, or we'll go ahead and move on to more testimony. The next person, Keisha Gunn. Keisha, are you there?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, members of the council. Thank you, council committee. I'm definitely in favor of this bill. What this pandemic has done, and I know that this bill would provide relief or help to manage the late fees after the pandemic, but what this pandemic has done has given everyone some insight into the financial distress that our neighbors and what they encounter on a regular basis. We're talking about our frontline workers. We're talking about the custodial staff at the hospital. We're talking about the checkout employee at the grocery market. We're talking about people who are hardworking individuals who are the lifeline and the bloodline of the community. And as Mr. Hill indicated, you know, paying your rent on a regular basis and finding the means to do so on time is and can be a stressor in and of itself. If people have the means to pay their rent, they do so. When circumstances make it difficult to do that on time, then the grace of a landlord would definitely be more than welcome. It's definitely a stressor, and it's anxiety producing to be in a situation where your first line of health, which is your dwelling, is insecure. The amount of affordable housing in Baltimore in and of itself is sparse. So when you look at how much people are paying, we're talking about people who make between 30 to 50% of AMI, and you take 5% of that and double, and you know, continue to add that on top of your rent day after day. That can be not only financially stressing, but it can create housing instability. Now, all we're doing is asking for landlords to be reasonable, to be patient, and for the city council to pass a bill that will mandate, again, like Matt said, a balancing of the scales of power. These times have given us the insight and the momentum to actually do some things that in the past we've been hesitant to do. So I'm asking, as a lifelong resident of Baltimore, as someone who has lived, learned, and worked here my entire life, and also as an Affordable Housing Trust Fund Commissioner, for us to take this step and to put our money where our mouth is and start to do things that show how much we value those people who make this city run and work. So thank you for your time.
Thank you. For hand raisers, if you've already spoken, can you please lower your hand so we can move on? Those that have already spoken, lower your hand or take your hand raise sign off. And we'll now go with Joe Mager. Are you there?
Yes, I'm here.
Please, a couple minutes.
Hi, my name is Joe Magar. I live in Baltimore's 14th district, and I'm here providing testimony on behalf of Jews United for Justice in support of the late fees and past due rent bill with the amendments proposed by Council President Moses. Jews United for Justice is an organization that organizes 1,600 people in the city to support local social, racial, and economic justice issues. As has been mentioned, there's a affordable housing crisis in Baltimore. 57% of households in Baltimore before the pandemic were considered a housing cost burden, which is to say 30% of their income, household income, is spent on housing. And as was mentioned before, many of those, a third of all renters in Baltimore, that cost exceeds 50% of their income. After battling this pandemic for a year, those figures are probably worse. This 30% threshold is not an ideal measure of affordability, but similar benchmarks between a quarter and a third of income have been enshrined as common wisdom for a really long time. The second century Rabbi Yitzhak argued that it would be unwise for someone to devote more than a third of their assets. And throughout the 19th and 20th century, no more than a week's wages was considered an affordable rent. And this was reflected in the Housing and Urban Development Act, setting a rent cap for public housing at 25% of income until 1981, when it was raised to 30. There are surely more accurate or equitable ways to measure affordability, but the information that we do have is very clear on one thing. Baltimore is living in gross violation of affordability norms that have been established for hundreds, if not thousands, of years. We don't look back in admiration at times when the needs of so many are left unmet. We condemn practices like debtor's jail and indentured servitude for systematically penalizing poverty under the false pretense of agency for all parties involved, and that bad outcomes are merely the result of bad decisions. At a time when so many are trapped between a plague and the prospect of losing their homes, we need to readdress how hundreds of thousands of Baltimoreans will be penalized every month for existing in a housing market that we know is unaffordable and regularly described as being in crisis. Leaving these policies unaddressed would be a moral failure, and enabling this continued penalization of the vulnerable will only serve to worsen the crisis. We must make it easier for those struggling to survive in times like these. Recently, the City Council has proven its willingness to take bold steps to protect renters by passing legislation establishing a right to counsel in Baltimore's rent courts. I hope you will continue to show a commitment to this issue, and on behalf of JUFJ, respectfully urge this committee to pass the late fees for past due rent bill with the amendments proposed by Council President Mosby. We do not support a version of this bill without those proposed amendments. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. Moving on to Catherine Howard. Catherine Howard.
Hi, good afternoon, Madam Chair. Catherine Howard, can you hear me?
Yes.
Great, thank you very much. Madam Chair and other committee members, my name is Catherine Howard. I am General Counsel for a property manager in town, Regional Management, Inc., and we are also members of the Maryland Multi-Housing Association. The Maryland Multi-Housing Association has written testimony that it provided regarding this bill. Some of our concerns were taken care of by the amendment that the law department has put in, but we still have other concerns about this bill. Just as a piece of background, we've had a lot of discussions this afternoon about the effect of COVID has taken on the tenant population and our resident population in Baltimore City. But I just want you to be aware and mindful of the effect that COVID has also had on your housing provider services and serves population here in Baltimore. Regional Management is a case in point. Our normal delinquency rate runs around 5%. When the pandemic started and was declared an emergency in March, our delinquency rate was about 9%. It has risen over the last months to over 20%. Essentially, that is an unheard of delinquency rate in any circumstance other than this kind of pandemic. That is putting a great strain on us. We have not laid off a single employee. We are still making services available to all of our tenants. We have not diminished those services in any way. And all of the housing providers in the Maryland Multi-Housing Association are essentially doing the same thing and experiencing the same thing. Unfortunately, this bill and some of its provisions are not going to be helpful. Let me just point out one thing. After the executive order that the governor's put in, it is declared no longer an emergency. There's a 90-day period during which that's still the parameters of that executive order are still in effect. So that there is a period of time that these folks will be able to, that have been affected by this, will have some time to recover. Specifically about this bill, we are concerned about extending the grace period to a 10-day period. The industry practice is a 5-day grace period. Most of us have that in our leases. To extend that just puts us in a position where if we ultimately ever get the chance to go back to have court action on delinquencies, that is just going to expand the amount of time that that delinquency continues, which is not helpful to either the tenant or to the landlord. I am very concerned on page 2, lines 29 through 31, regarding the fact that the court-awarded filing fees and awarded costs cannot be collected, because that is in conflict with state law, Real Property Code 8-401 and Title 9 of the Public Local Law. I also have concerns about the 10-day grace period that starts in also on page 2 in section B, lines 14 through 20. Our problem with the lost in the mail issue, as some have couched it here, is that we are not going to know when a public benefits check has been mailed, or any of those other things that that we should be able to tell. But we are going to be stuck with a 10-day grace period that starts at a date that we have no control over and have no knowledge of. So I think that we really need to look more carefully at that provision.
Thank you.
Yes,
Oh,
last
okay,
but not least, yes, I'll wrap up. The provisions for requesting in writing that a landlord provide a written statement of charges, I think that it is much too complicated to add a district court case number and a copy of that to the complaint form. And any landlord should be able to provide a ledger. We have to keep one by law. And I would suggest that those provisions are to some extent duplicative. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. And I do want to recognize a council member that has joined us, Councilman Christopher Burnett. And I do want to say again, make sure that your phone is unmuted.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Sorry, I'm having some tech issues, so I can't do video, but thank you for recognizing.
Oh, no problem. But everyone, please make sure you're shut down so we don't hear you. We've been hearing still little bits and pieces. And if you've already testified, make sure you lower your raised hand. Now we're going to move on to Mr. I forget him. Ari Plott. Mr.
Yes. Thank you, Madam Chair. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi.
Hi.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, esteemed members of the committee. I'm Ari Plott here from Boston Plow Law Offices. On behalf of Greater Baltimore Board of Realtors, otherwise known as GBBR. We're an association of realtors, brokers, and property managers. We respectfully oppose this bill. Some of the reasons have already been stated. I'll be brief, Madam Chair. We oppose the bill for some specific items. For example, the 10-day provision, the 1% cap, and the issue with when the check is mailed provision. It would be almost impossible. It's be impossible to know when the check is actually mailed. So that provision is very difficult to comply with. And then we oppose the concept. Landlords are also struggling financially at the moment. There's losing a lot of money that they won't be able to recover. They're still responsible to pay mortgages, utilities, water bills, property taxes, etc. Courts are heavily delayed at the moment, so the timing is this will just continue to push everything out longer and longer. There are significant remedies in place at the moment for tenants that are struggling, such the evictions you can't do any evictions at the moment, and then the Governor Hogan mandatory what we spoke about earlier, prohibiting the late fees as well. And I'll wrap up with just saying that would be happy to work with the sponsor, Councilman Stokes, and the industry as well, but we just have to respectfully oppose this bill. And thank you for your time.
Thank you for your testimony. So we do have some callers on. We're going to go through the callers.
Madam Chair.
Yeah, Councilman Dorsey, you have a question for Ari?
Yeah, well, I just want to kind of push back on this idea that about when the check is in the mail being like a difficult thing to determine. I'm looking for something I saw online a couple of days ago. Basically, a complaint that a Christmas card that was mailed on December 13th had just shown up in the mail, and that something else that had been sent on December 3rd or 4th had just shown up in the mail, like a thank you note or a condolences or something like this. And the comment that was made was the difficulties with the Postal Service have the potential to have social ramifications, repercussions to them, to kind of what we think of as, like kind of the norms of social things that occur through the mail. The thing is we know that letter of condolence was mailed on whatever, December 3rd, and the thank you was sent on December 4th, and the Christmas card was sent on December 13th, because they get stamped when they're collected, not when they're delivered. So we know when a thing goes in the mail, because they get collected and they get stamped, and we always have that to refer back to. And as dysfunctional as the mail has become, that remains unchanged and unchallenged. And there should never be any question until further notice that this remains a core function of the post office, that date stamping mail is an important part of our kind of social infrastructure. Thank you.
Thank you, Council Member, for your clarification. Are there any other questions or comments from the committee at this point? So I'm going to go down the list. Thank you, Ari, for your testimony. We have it.
Sure.
We definitely have it in the bill file.
Thank you.
We're going to go down the list. You can basically state whether you don't want to testify for this bill or the next one. We'll start with Carol Rice.
Interested in testifying.
I'm sorry, you're not interested in testifying? Okay.
That's right.
Thank you. Carolyn Johnson. Oh, I'm sorry. See, I can't. Dan, did you want to testify on this bill? It's just the name Dan. Moving on to the next, since we haven't heard from Dan. Garrett Good?
I unraised my hand. I'm testifying for another for 21-0001.
Thank you. Moving down to Keisha Allen. Did you want to testify on this bill? 21? Okay. Moving down to Lena Leone. Sorry if I mispronounced your name. Lisa O'Reilly, your hand is raised.
Yes, ma'am. I'm here. Thank you very much, Chairperson and committee. Just to say, just as a private citizen, I support this bill. But on behalf of single people who are really up against it at the moment, yes, I appreciate families. I think one of the issues in Baltimore City is that we work in percentages. 5% of a late fee, 10% of a late fee. For people who are single and who are unemployed at the moment, your unemployment is in and around $200 a week. There's no way I'm making my rent right now. I'm just lucky I have a good landlord who's willing to work with me, and I have longevity in that tenancy. I think one of the issues overall, and we know this because I know that Matt Hill and lots of other people on this call are working to lower rent altogether. It's really not tenable to be able to just ask $1,300 for a one-bedded apartment. Having said that, I would really, really ask the landlords to look into the fact that 5% to some people is an enormous amount of money. If we were to bring the percentage down to 1% of a late fee, something that really makes a difference to people altogether. But I appreciate that this bill is for the time that it's in. So thank you very much, and thank you, Councilwoman, for your chair. Thank you. I'll close off now. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you for your testimony. I think the last person on this one, Nancy Newman. Nancy, did you want to speak on late fees? Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Madam Chair, I just want to clarify something real quick.
Yes.
Can I clarify something real quick?
Yeah.
I want to bring up the issue with the realtors. Those issues were amended out of the bill, and also the bill allows electronic payments to offer as evidence. So just want to clear that up also.
So that was from the testimony of the Greater Baltimore Board of Realtors?
Yeah.
You said that was cleared up?
That issue, they were amended out of the bill that he was talking about.
Okay, gotcha.
And the bill allows electronic payments to offer as evidence. So the lost mail is irrelevant. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you so much. That clears up Councilman Dorsey's question, just for clarification for the committee. Just checking, there is no more testimony on this bill, and as I had stated earlier to the committee, we're going to recess this bill because I'm sure after the testimony and some of the information that was submitted, we still have some more things to read and go over, and I'll be notifying you when we'll meet again on this bill. We're now going to move to the next bill, which is bill number 20-0022, the security deposit alternatives, for the purpose of requiring certain lease provisions to create alternatives besides the traditional security deposit for residential leases under certain circumstances, defining certain terms and prohibiting this subsection from limiting a landlord's ability to require certain qualifications on a residential tenant's application for a new residential lease. This bill was introduced on January 11th, 2021. This bill was sponsored by yours truly, Councilwoman Sharon Green Middleton. And I just like to say that, we have submitted a package of bills to update and make changes. And just on behalf of this bill, it's really, a number of things that the council is working on, and that is trying to move forward our equity lens and reviewing a number of old, outdated policies and bills, and this housing package this particular piece is one of them. There's just so many pieces to this legislation that really is going to help the renter. And it's been a long time since we really looked at ways of having renter relief. And this just seems so easy for a compromise and looking at ways to help our people that are struggling every day. They live paycheck to paycheck. There's areas that they can live in, but at the very beginning, you have this big security deposit, which a lot of times is the same amount of your rent. Sometimes it's a security deposit is two months rent ahead of time, and especially now during COVID, you can really see some of the issues that people have been really struggling with for a very long time. So I'm excited about this bill. We're now going to move forward, and the committee will now hear from the agency representatives. And again, we'll start with the city solicitor's office. Is
okay, I'm sorry, Madam Chair, my mute button was covered. I couldn't get it out. So anyway, Elena DePietro for the Baltimore City Law Department, and I'd just like to say that we put a lot of work into this bill report to make sure that we covered all the bases with respect to the state law and whether or not the city could legislate in this area. And we're happy to report that we feel that there is that is not preempted by state law, and that because the wording of the bill allows for the landlord to accept installment payments or a rental security insurance, that it doesn't violate the prohibition in state law regarding rental security insurance. So therefore, we can approve the bill for form and legal sufficiency.
Thank you. Moving on to the Department of Housing and Community Development.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair and members of the committee. Stephanie Murdoch, Legislative Liaison for the Department of Housing and Community Development. Like the bill we previously just heard, this may offer some limited protection for our tenants, and it could help alleviate hardships. We do know that the majority of cost-burdened renters live in the city of Baltimore, so we stand by our report. We do not object to the passage of this legislation. Thank you.
Thank you, Stephanie. Housing Authority of Baltimore City. Do we still have a representative on?
Yes, Madam Chair. Bill Wells, still for the Housing Authority.
Hi.
Good afternoon. So just to clarify, the Housing Authority, through its programs, the Low-Income Public Housing and the Housing Choice Voucher Program, serve residents who are at 30% or below of AMI. And both of these programs operate slightly differently. So I wanted to address the public housing side first, as it's very different in terms of security deposits. The Housing Authority caps security deposits at $50. And that's the maximum that any household would pay as a security deposit.
Bye.
Oh,
great. Be careful out there this week. It could get nasty.
Make sure you mute your phone, please.
I'm sorry.
It caps at $50. In addition, because rents are income-based, if a household has an adjusted gross income of $0, then the rent would be $0. Therefore, the security deposit would be $0. So there's a scale based on the amount of rent that a household pays in public housing, but that can never be more than $50. In addition, the Housing Authority already offers installment payments for security deposits. So we believe that in our public housing program, we actually satisfy the intent of this bill. We would agree that renters who receive rental assistance through the Housing Choice Voucher Program, where we don't control the leases, but those leases are controlled by private landlords, could see relief in terms of their security deposits. And so we acknowledge that there is a benefit to the Housing Choice Voucher participants, even though their portion of rent is capped at 30% of their adjusted income, with the remaining amount of their rent being paid directly to their landlord from the housing authority. The security deposit would be required from the renter themselves. And lastly, there's a provision that talks about weekly leases. None of the leases in our programs operate except on annual basis, and they're monthly payments, monthly leases. So that provision wouldn't apply. So much like 210021, we would ask that HAC believes that federally subsidized rental assistance programs should be exempted from these provisions if they meet the intent by both capping maximum security deposit and allowing the deposits to be paid in installments. We think that we meet that and exceed that in our low-income public housing programs, and we would support that for the Housing Choice Voucher renters in those programs.
Thank you. And you did send us this information, today as well.
Yes, and also forwarded it to Jennifer during the meeting.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
And then just for the committee, we do have more to read and things to go over with this particular bill as well. So we're not going to vote on this bill today, but we are going to hear the other testimony and put this in with our decisions as we move along for this bill. Department of Real Estate, Walter Horton, are you still there? Okay, I don't see him on for this bill. So we'll have to check on his testimony. And I do see Natasha Mihu from the legislative office, from the mayor's office, has also joined us. We're now going to go ahead and take public testimony. And we'll start with the hand raisers, and we'll again start at the top with Lisa O'Reilly. Did you have a statement on this bill?
Just to say that I just wonder, tying two bills together, I just wonder, would it be not a good idea to have your security deposit used to pay your late fees if this doesn't go through? I don't know if that's legally allowable, but it just strikes me that if you're going to put down 2 months' rent as a security deposit to be put against any damages you do at the end of your tenancy, at this stage, would you not, that's your money technically, would it not be, in a pinch, could your landlord not use some of that money as security deposit to pay your late fees? Just,
Thank you. That's a good question. We'll have the city solicitor's office and our legal counsel work on and review that question.
Thank you.
Mr. DeGraffereed, are you there? Is still there?
Yes, ma'am, I'm here.
Could you check on to that suggestion that was raised?
Yes, I'm writing it down. I'll look into it.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Ms. O'Reilly. We'll move on to Danis Jones.
Hello, Madam Chair. I'd like to testify on the Affordable Housing Trust Fund bill.
Okay, we'll pass you to the next one. Catherine Howard?
Yep.
Or did you want to testify on the security deposit or the land trust?
Yes, Yes, hi, Madam Chair, my name's Kathy Howard. I am here to testify favorable with amendments on your bill. We have representing both Regional Management Inc., the company that I work for, and the Maryland Multi-Housing Association, which represents housing providers in Baltimore City and in addition around the state. We submitted written testimony with the amendments that we think that this bill potentially needs. We think that this is a very good idea. In fact, some of our members already do things like this and do have security deposits being able to be paid in installments by their tenants. But the First Amendment that we would suggest is to define what security deposit means in the same way that state law does, as any payment of money, including payment of the last month's rent in advance at the time it's given to a landlord in order to protect the landlord against non-payment of rent, damage due to breach of lease, or damage to the leased premises, common areas, major appliances, and furnishings. That's found in the real property article. And I think perhaps Ms. O'Reilly's last suggestion might not be a bad one either to add into that. But that would be our first concern, to make sure that we have like definitions between state and public local law. We would also suggest that the term rental security insurance include rental security deposit insurance. There's two different kinds of insurance that we're talking about in this bill. One is the security deposit insurance, which is a product that we have met with some of the vendors of, and that it's a very good product. But there is also a thing known as renter's insurance, which is something separate. It has nothing to do with the security deposit. It has to do with protecting the renter's personal property and liability as a renter. And I think that clarification should be made, and we did provide you with language that we think would clarify that renter's security deposit insurance is not renter's insurance. And there are many leases that mandate that a renter have that renter's insurance for their own protection under the lease, and we would make sure that that's clarified, that that can be done as well. Last but not least, we also have some concerns in the latter part of the bill that we want to make sure that if someone does not take the rental security deposit insurance option, that and then does not make a payment arrangement for the security deposit itself, that it is clear that somewhere along the line they are deemed to have decided that they will take the security deposit payment arrangement route, because they have not procured the rental security deposit insurance. And we just want to make sure that there is a security deposit mechanism if someone fails to choose that by the time they sign a lease. The second thing is that if someone is paying their security deposit in installments, we want to make sure that there is that security deposit installment, if they fail to pay it with their rent as the bill provides, that is collectible through the rent court process as additional rent.
Can you submit your testimony to have you submitted your testimony?
We did.
Okay.
Thank you. It's in, and I can also make sure that I get it to you personally, but I know that our legislative liaison did submit the testimony today.
To Jennifer Coates, so it gets to all of our members.
Yes, and I'll be happy to make sure that I can email it when I get back to the office.
Thank you. I want to move up to, please, if you've already, once you have spoken, please lower your hand. I want to move back up to Jordan Stein. Jordan, are you on?
Yes, I am, Madam Vice President. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you, Madam Vice President and members of the committee. very excited to see your leadership, Madam Vice President, on this important issue. I represent a company called Rhino. We offer the insurance product that replaces cash security deposits for renters. We're proud to already serve many renters and property owners in Baltimore City as well as across the country. Obviously, housing affordability is a critical issue. Across the country, $45 billion currently sits in cash security deposits, over $300 million worth in Baltimore City. By offering choice and optionality to renters, as Madam Vice President, your bill does here, in the form of insurance programs for a couple of dollars a month or installment payment programs do, renters have a barrier to getting into stable housing broken down. If renters can afford the monthly rent, they should be able to rent the apartment. The bottom line is, as has been discussed already, insurance programs of this nature, at lease signing, are offered as an option to many residents already. And this bill would put that option in front of all renters while still protecting property owners against excessive damages and unpaid rent, as they, of course, have every right and expectation to be able to be. So this just is a common sense win-win solution that I think is a huge win for the city and the community more generally. And I think it should be pointed out, Madam Vice President, that in 2020, the city of Cincinnati, Ohio, and then the city of Atlanta, Georgia, have both passed ordinances quite similar to the one that is being discussed here today, to great success, and in both cases unanimously on those two councils. Fundamentally, COVID-19 has only exacerbated affordability challenges, and providing that choice and optionality, not a requirement to any renter, but that choice, really is just now and always just really something that is really effective. What we have seen in the city of Baltimore are, to name a couple of examples, young professionals who have found a couple of dollars a month for an insurance program to allow them to get into an apartment without savings. A woman fleeing a domestic violence situation, needing to get into new housing without savings and an independent bank account, has found that to be a positive experience. So we just think that the choice and optionality that this bill offers all renters and protection it offers property owners presents a win, and really applaud you, Madam Vice President, and co-sponsors here on the committee for really embracing an approach that has worked very well in the cities of Atlanta, Georgia, Cincinnati, Ohio, and many others moving forward across the country. So happy to make ourselves available to others on the committee to answer any other questions, but fundamentally think this is a fantastic win to bring down upfront move-in costs without costing the city's taxpayers or property owners a dime.
Thank you for your testimony. Moving on to Matt Hill. Matt, did you want to testify on this bill?
Yes, Madam Chair. Thank you. Members of the committee, again, Matt Hill, Public Justice Center. You have written testimony from us. This is on behalf of Public Justice Center, Jews United for Justice, Communities United, Bolton House Residents Association, United Workers Beyond the Boundaries, Right to Housing Alliance, and the Homeless Persons Representation Project. We are favorable with amendments on this bill. And we want to thank Madam Chair for bringing this bill. I agree with what everyone said, that the lack of a security deposit is a huge barrier for tenants who are fleeing a domestic violence situation, who are living in really substandard conditions, which, again, the consolidated plan has some great data on this. 48% of the city's rental units are substandard. And so in my practice, at least, we frequently see folks who really need to move and simply cannot afford the security deposit, first month's rent, and moving expenses. And if all this bill did was say that the landlords are required to offer an installment plan, we would be completely favorable, no amendments, and very excited. Where we're a little bit concerned or confused or just really don't have enough information is with respect to rental security insurance, which, as I understand it, is not exactly insurance, but it's called a surety bond of some sort. I'm not exactly clear on this, and we just really need more information. And the problem becomes that renters may not know what they're getting into. And so, for instance, let's say your security deposit's $1,000. As I understand it, you may pay one of these insurance companies $100, maybe it's $200, in order to have and the landlord gets coverage essentially. And then the tenant moves out, and the landlord wants to withhold $800 of that security deposit. This happens all the time, and there's a dispute between the landlord and the tenant over whether or not the landlord gets to withhold that $800, right? Because the only thing they're supposed to withhold for is ordinary wear and tear. But frankly, oftentimes we have clients complaining that landlords are withholding much more. So, as I understand it, and again, I really do want to understand more about this product, the landlord would go and they'd file a claim with the insurance company to get paid the $800. And then the insurance company sends a bill to the tenant saying, hey, you owe us $800. What if the tenant disputes that? Who are they going to file a case against? Are they going to are they going to dispute that in court? Where are they going to file a case? Are they going to, what's the remedy for tenants who dispute the landlord filing a claim against the insurance company? So we really need to understand the answer to that question and a few others. There's an article that's linked in my testimony from Shelter Force Magazine. It's a leading housing policy publication. Take a look at that. It raises some of these same questions. And so again, we really love the intent. We love security deposit installments, and we have some significant questions about the insurance product. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Matt. You just gave us more things to review and look over.
Chair Middleton.
Yes. Councilman Conway, you have a question for Matt?
No, I have a couple of comments relating to Matt's Matt's thought. I had the very same thought too, Matt. Concern about whose incentive would be taken into consideration in the course of a dispute. Interestingly, the company in the middle will get their money one way or another. So I think if we could find a way to have a third party make that decision, that is independent, I think that might be something to consider. The other consideration is with, in the case that the tenant is required to pay the security deposit, they then will pay the $500 or whatever it is for the fees, requiring that you can't be charged interest fees or late fees or anything on that. There should be some sort of understanding there so that this tenant doesn't end up paying much more than they would normally have paid if they'd done the security deposit on the front end. I think that's got to be important to the fairness. I think you're going to find that folks that don't have the security deposit money are often not going to have that security deposit money at the end of their tenancy. So we want to make sure that we protect folks on both ends if we can. Thank you, Ms. Chair.
Sorry there, thank you. Before we have a number of people that still are in the testifying mode, so we want to get through that. And we'll go ahead and start with Frank Boston. Please lower your hand if you've already testified. Mr. Boston?
Where the hell's Frank?
Oh, hold your thought, Councilman Stokes.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, hello, Mr. Boston. You got a few minutes?
Yep, I'll be very, very clear. I was trying to turn my screen on, but I don't think we can. Good afternoon, Madam Chair and members of the committee. I am Frank Boston III. Keep trying. And I am here on behalf of Leaselock Corporation, and we support this bill. It is a good bill, a good concept, and God knows people who can't afford rent surely can't afford to pay the security deposit on top of it. as a father of a daughter who lives in New York, who has come up with 2 months security deposit in advance, you can imagine how much that costs me. So we definitely support bills like this. The bill offers tenants and options to the traditional security deposits, and our company also offers options, and we offer landlords lease insurance. And Chris Grimm, who's a representative from the company, will be further testifying in this regard. But I just wanted to let you know that we do support the bill. We like the concept, and we have an amendment that we think makes the bill better and gives the tenant an additional option.
And you have submitted that to the committee, the amendments, correct?
Yeah, we have submitted it, not to the full committee, but I will. But we have submitted it to the City Council President's office. But we will get it to each member in the committee staff. Yes, ma'am.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Christopher Grimm, did you want to follow up with your testimony with Mr. Boston quickly, please?
Hi, yes, be happy to. Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. Thank you for allowing me to testify today. I am Christopher Grimm, and on behalf of LeaseLock, I respectfully request that the committee adopt a short amendment to ensure that Baltimore apartment renters can choose from among different security deposit alternatives, including those offered by building owners. LeaseLock has a simple goal: to help renters move into apartments without paying costly security deposits, to help property owners eliminate costly administration of deposits, and for both, eliminate 99% of arguments about apartment damages when leases end. For a modest monthly premium, LeaseLock insures property owners for up to $5,000 in lost rent and $500 in damages. Once protected by insurance, owners can then offer renters the option of paying a full security deposit, typically 1 or 2 months rent, or paying no deposit. Instead, they would pay a monthly deposit waiver fee that in Maryland averages $25 a month. Nationwide, when given the option, 92% of renters select the waiver fee over a deposit. As introduced, the bill would only authorize apartment insurance policies purchased by renters. Our amendment would provide for additional security deposit alternatives without adding any burdens on renters. Notably, with the addition of our amendment, the bill would give renters the absolute right to choose to pay a deposit, purchase their own deposit insurance, or pay a deposit waiver fee if the landlord offers that option. More security deposit alternatives will result in more people breaking through housing barriers in Baltimore. Our amendment is a win-win for renters and property owners, and we ask for your support. Thank you. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you for your testimony. We do have it in the bill file, or we'll be getting it there for our discussion. Thank you. Elam Brockvar?
Yes.
Brockvar.
Yes. Can you hear me, Madam Chair?
Yes. Sorry if I pronounced your name wrong.
No worries. You're not the first and you won't be the last. I appreciate it. I appreciate the time, Madam Chair, and members of the committee for allowing me the chance to testify. My name is Elam Brockvar Klein, and I'm a resident of Baltimore City's Old Goucher neighborhood in Council District 12. I'm expressing this testimony on behalf of Jews United for Justice to communicate our support for this bill with an amendment, the amendment that Matt Hill outlined earlier. We support mandating that landlords offer an installment plan as an alternative to the traditional security deposit, but we do have concerns about the rental security insurance product, and would encourage members of the committee to amend this bill until we have further information about that. Nonetheless, making security deposits payable through installment would reduce a fiscal barrier for many renters, as has been stated, and would increase access to a greater variety of housing options citywide without asking landlords to lose out on any revenue. As was stated earlier, Jews United for Justice just for some more context, is an organization that organizes about 1,600 folks in the city to support local social, racial, and economic justice issues. And as a Jewish organization, Jewish tradition tells us that all people should have the resources sufficient to meet their needs. And as such, we as a society have an obligation to ensure that people have access to housing, and especially during times of emergency. In some ways, as a society, we have failed to live up to this value. As we know, according to a Federal Reserve report from 2018, long before this pandemic, 40% of Americans said they would struggle to come up with funds to cover an unexpected expense of just $400. And with many security deposits far exceeding that number, and with far more unemployed and underemployed households due to this pandemic, that one-time security deposit cost poses a significant barrier. Additionally, according to a recent Washington Post article, many prospective tenants are actually able to cover monthly rent, but are turned away simply by the burden of that security deposit. And we know this is especially a reality in Baltimore City, given that the majority of renter households are cost burdened. And so lastly, as other cities are implementing similar policies, Cincinnati, Atlanta, to name a couple, we have a crucial opportunity to demonstrate our willingness to tackle these daunting challenges with bold policy changes. And especially with this policy in particular, we have the opportunity to pioneer this piece of legislation in the Mid-Atlantic region. And in the process, we would send yet another message to renters that we as a city and council in particular is ready to remedy decades of policies that have tipped the scales of justice against them. So for all of these reasons,
thank you. You're wrapping it up.
Yep, absolutely. So just want to say that, again, we respectfully urge you to support this bill with the proposed amendment from Baltimore Renters United. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. And now we'll remember, if you please lower your hand in both the attendees and I don't see any more in the panel, but please lower your hand if you've already spoken on this security deposit bill. So I'm looking, I see Keisha Gunn. I know you spoke on the other bill. Did you have some words on the security deposit bill?
Yes, I do. Thank you, Madam Chair, and the other committee members, and also the residents of Baltimore. I'm not going to reiterate so many awesome and pertinent points that have already been made. What I do want to make reference back to is a statement that you, Vice President Middleton, made initially with regards to how there are instances where individuals and families are charged 2 months rent security deposit. And what has been kind of related to this is an extension and kind of an evolution of redlining. This is just another way of kind of sorting through those who you deem unreasonable or unsavory residents in your community. And if you're not eligible, if you're not capable of paying 2 months security deposit, then we don't want you here. And this bill would definitely dismantle that type of redlining, modern day redlining. So that's really all I wanted to add to this. Thank you so much, and I urge a favorable report. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. And looking down, let me just make sure I covered, it didn't miss anyone. And I don't, Jennifer, do you see anyone else? I think we can. So what we're going to do is recess on this bill as well, because as you heard, there some amendments that the committee needs to go through. And I'm going through the telephone callers. I don't. Bernadine Kimball, did you have something to say on this bill? I don't think so. I think that covered it. Last call for any callers. I just want to make sure I don't miss anyone. Councilman Stokes, did you have a comment?
I did, but you about to wrap up. I have another meeting. I want to excuse myself, but I'd like the meeting get ready to end so I can hang on. Thank
So
you.
we do have one more bill. Thank you all committee for being patient as we get through. This is our main part of making decisions. I'm hopeful that this next bill, we probably can do a vote on it. I know the sponsor of the bill is Odette Ramos. And let me just go ahead and we'll move on. The security deposit bill is in recess, and we're now going to move on the council resolution 21-0001R, which is an investigative hearing affordable housing trust fund for the purpose of inviting the acting commissioner of the Department of Housing and Community Development, relevant staff, and the chair and other members of the Affordable Housing Trust Fund Commission to provide an update on the status of the Affordable Housing Trust Fund, including but not limited to information regarding revenue raised each year since passage of the ordinance 18-215, projects and initiatives funded so far, projects and initiatives in the pipeline to be funded, the spending plan, the ideas for improving the fund. The bill was introduced on January 11th. 2021. The bill was sponsored by Council Member Odette Ramos, and we know Council Member Odette is very passionate about all of these housing initiatives. She's been a person on the forefront of many of these bills for many years. And now we'll hear comments from the sponsor.
It was introduced the 13th.
And I'll take that back. It wasn't introduced on the 11th. Typographical error. It was introduced on January 13th, 2021. Councilmember Odette, you're on.
Okay, great. Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee, council members that are on, that are not on the committee, advocates and guests. Thank you so much for giving us the opportunity to talk about the Affordable Housing Trust Fund. Just by way of understanding the history of how this came about, in 2016, a group of advocates and funders came together about the need for more money for affordable housing and dedicating revenue. I'm honored to be one of those people that came together with, in my old role of as the executive director of the Community Development Network of Maryland. We also worked with the United Workers, Housing Roundtable, Public Justice Center, Homeless Persons Representation Project, and so many more. We formed the Housing for All Coalition. And many of you know, we looked at models from, we started out thinking about the fact that, other places in the nation have been putting together affordable housing trust funds as a way to get some dedicated revenue for affordable housing. We worked with the Center for Community Change. There are about 700 jurisdictions in the US that have housing trust funds, so their expertise was very helpful in figuring out what this could look like. We also figured out that establishing an affordable housing trust fund could easily be done through the city council, but we wanted to make sure that the council had the power to actually add funding, and that's where the charter amendment came in. And as you know, many of you participated, my colleagues participated in gathering signatures to get that charter amendment on the ballot. We did it in 6 weeks. We had a massive coalition working on this, ended up collecting about 18,000 signatures, 12,000 of which were valid. And it was actually really great fun to do that. So it was put on the ballot as question J, and we ran a campaign to make sure that question J passed later on in 2016. So Baltimore passed question J with 85% of the vote. To me and to all of us, we felt that was a massive mandate, that affordable housing is extremely important to everyone in our city. Making sure that people have stable housing is extremely important. 2 years later, thanks to the leadership of many of you on this committee from the past council, we were able to get past a funding source, which is a increase of the recordation and transfer tax on transactions above $1 million. And that's supposed to be bringing in about $13 to $17 million. And then advocates, at the time, myself and others, signed an MOU with the city to add over time another $7.5 million in bond funds to try to make up for that commitment of $20 million. That was our goal, to bring more affordable housing to Baltimore. The language in the ballot initiative is clear, and hopefully that can be entered into the record. We wanted flexible source of funding for low-income and very low-income neighbors. These are our neighbors that are the ones that are hardest to serve because it is more expensive. There's subsidy, there's so much that is needed. And by flexible, we can use it for more units, a local voucher program, rental assistance, senior home repair, affordable home ownership, and so much more. It's really a great resource that I'm so proud to be a part of. So I ended up, after that being passed, I started door knocking and campaigning for the position I hold now. And, I met many neighbors along the way. And I kept thinking to myself, does the Affordable Housing Trust Fund help them as well? What I saw was seniors who needed to have more to age in place in a way that they are comfortable. I saw people needing, help with furnace, help with rent. I saw so many people that really needed, also were concerned about our homeless neighbors and needing more permanent supportive housing. So I thought to myself, well, is the Affordable Housing Trust Fund helping those neighbors that I saw as I was door knocking? And so that's really the impetus of this particular initiative, to try to see, what's going on with the fund, and where can we help. One, of course, being another funding source, because we do need more money. But also, I want to point out the data is really clear. We heard earlier statistics about how many of our renters are very severely cost burdened. They're paying more than 30% of their income on rent. We know that HABC has a wait list of 25,000 people waiting to get housing vouchers to be able to get into stable housing. On any given night, there are 3,000 and possibly more now with the pandemic, people who are experiencing homelessness. And the waiting list for HUB's program to help our seniors is way oversubscribed. So that the need. The Maryland Affordable Housing Needs Assessment just came out on Monday, so we have to dig through that data, and there's a lot there. But obviously, a lot of the things I just talked about are in that report. The priority being, for renters, there's barriers to access rental housing, the need for improved relationships with landlords and tenants, and a lack of mixed income rental. The other need is a lack of for homeowners, lack of long-term public and private support for home ownership, lots of vacant properties, which, Councilman Torrance and I are going to work on more tools around that, and disparities in home ownership. So there's a lot there to unpack. And then also there are a lot of suggestions of how we can actually help address affordable housing by increasing homeowner education and tools for foreclosure prevention, streamline acquisition and rehab, increase funding for home buyers like closing cost assistance. I'm almost done, Madam Chair. And increases for renters, helping to increase the supply of income restricted rental homes, tenant education, and the like. So we need to dig into the data a bit more, and I'm very excited to do so. I want to just end by saying I'm very proud to have been part of the coalition that formed this fund. I'm proud of the work that the commission that we'll hear about today and DHCD has done to get this fund off the ground and starting to be operational. And I'm, very excited about all of the advocacy that has been going through this fund. I have multiple questions for the department that are likely to be answered during their presentation. What are the metrics for success? How many people have been served so far from the funds? How many units have been developed? What is the revenue coming from our designated funds and just more? What are the plans for increasing the number of units built? We need to put people in homes and in units. What are the plans for helping our seniors age in place? And what are the plans for assisting current renters and helping with rent relief? And I have many more, but I'll stop there. I just want to thank all of you for participating in this hearing today. Madam Chair, thank you for scheduling this hearing, and to my colleagues for being a part of it. This is really about something that all of us in Baltimore built, and how can we make it, how do we know what's going on with it, and how can we make it work for everyone? And I really appreciate your time, and I look forward to the hearing. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilwoman. And so we have three agencies that we're going to hear from, three representatives, Department of Housing and Community Development, and the Housing Authority is on the list, and also the Department of Finance. So we'll start with the representatives from Housing, and I see the Acting Commissioner Alice Kennedy on. Alice, did you want to start with comments on this resolution?
Yes. Hi, good afternoon, Madam Chair.
Hi, Commissioner. How are you?
Good. And we actually also have a presentation to share with you. So a staff member will be sharing that presentation.
Okay.
And we'll go through.
I think Stacy Freed was trying to get on. I'm not sure what's going on. She's unable to get on for some reason, if that's who you were looking for.
Monica, well, it would be great to have Stacy in case we have any questions, but Monica Nemagata will be running the presentation, running the slides for us today.
Do you want to, one of them can email Jennifer Cook, if you want to email her the presentation as well? Is that possible? And yes. She could probably pull it up on the screen.
Okay, so this is Monica. I can email the presentation, and should I share it or should I just email it?
You can, Monica, if you have it ready, we can share so we can get started.
Okay.
Right.
I think I need
she has
to be able to access the share button.
Yeah, hold on a minute.
Okay, 1 second. Jennifer, she's making you a presenter, so go ahead.
Great.
You're ready. There we go.
Excellent. Okay. So we can just, next slide. Thank you. So good afternoon, Madam Chair, as well as all of the council members with us this afternoon. I do want to thank Councilwoman Ramos for her introduction to this resolution to bring us all here today. Next slide. So to talk a little bit, and I'm going to be discussing some things here that Councilwoman Ramos also discussed, as well as we look into kind of the creation of the fund. But as we talk about the need here in the city of Baltimore, there is a great need for affordable housing options for our residents. When you look at the number of residents that we have on the waiting list for units within the Housing Authority of Baltimore City, when you look at the number of residents that we have within the city that are experiencing homelessness, and also just the number of residents that we have in the city of Baltimore that are severely or extremely cost burdened when it comes to their housing costs, and having that be essentially create housing insecurity for them, where they may be on the brink of losing their home or having to move and not knowing where they will move to next to be able to make affordable housing payments. So we have, 37,000 households in the city of Baltimore earn 30% or less of AMI. That's around $31,200 for a household of 4. And even if you're a household of one or two, that's in the range of less than $21,000 per year in terms of income for a household of one, and less than $25,000 income for a household of two within the city. So also, this, like the Councilwoman Ramos stated, the statewide housing needs assessment just came out yesterday, and I know that we are all starting to kind of take a look at that, and we do have to dive deeper into that needs assessment. It does have a needs assessment associated with the Baltimore region, which is Baltimore City, as well as some of our surrounding counties. But the key needs that we know of are specific for those extremely low-income residents below 30% AMI. We also know that 23% of the state's total of residents in the extremely low income is in Baltimore City. So that is 23% is a significant number of concentration of the extremely low-income residents within the city of Baltimore. So I think that across the board, we, as DHCD at the agency, as well as within the city and with our many partners and the commission, the Affordable Housing Trust Fund Commission, recognize the great need within the city for safe and affordable housing for our residents. Next slide. This, I'm not going to actually have to go too far into this slide. This talks a little bit about the history that Councilwoman Ramos just went over. And focusing on that Housing for All coalition, and question J with that did pass with 85%, 83% of the approval, 85% of approval for that question. Next slide. After the creation of the fund, as well as the creation of the legislation for the tax to provide a revenue source for the fund, we have had a significant and hefty outreach and community engagement process for the, to look at the trust fund, the commission members, as well as the creation of the spending plan, the first spending plan for the fund, and talking in terms of just overall public comment on, what are priorities and how does that work. We, next slide, had many meetings, and I do want to make note here that a lot of these original meetings that kind of started to have us as the agency start to look at working with the commission members and the advocacy community and the public on the creation of and development of the spending plan was through a fairly intense and transparent community engagement process with meetings that occurred all over the city. So we have notable meetings, some here that we wanted to just lay out. One of which was at Morgan State University back in October of 2019, and there we not only heard from the Department of Finance and looking at revenue, but we also had Dr. Lawrence Brown, who his new book is out on the Black Butterfly. He was also there to also talk about the need that we have around affordable housing in the city, some of the history related to how we got here in terms of having a great need, and also being part of the dialogue in terms of creation of priorities of the fund for the first spending plan. Next slide. The legal framework for the Affordable Housing Trust Fund and its established scope, it is here to support low-income households earning 50% or less of AMI, and half of the fund's support at or below 30% AMI, which is considered our extremely low income range for residents. It has a ranges of use that we have, either whether or not that be for new development, preservation of existing units, support for existing homeowners, which is also preservation of existing affordable units as well. DHCD is the administering agency, and it has the advisory board, which is the Affordable Housing Trust Fund Commission. Next slide. The commission is 12 members. We have 4 resident representatives at varying different levels. So we have a renter at 30% AMI, 50%, and different requirements there. The role of the commission is to make recommendations, advise, help establish policies, rules. They also submit an annual report to the mayor and city council. I can't say that that annual report, the first annual report, is slated to be discussed at the February Trust Fund Commission meeting. So they will be discussing that, and that report should be provided to mayor and city council within the beginning first couple of weeks of March after that meeting we have at the end of the February. Next slide, please. So this does talk a little bit about the ordinance, as Councilwoman Ramos also mentioned, in terms of what was created as a dedicated funding stream to support the Affordable Housing Trust Fund. To date, we have collected over $19 million. That is also fiscal year 21. That is a year-to-date number, fiscal year 20. And it should be also noted that fiscal year 19 was a partial year. So it wasn't an entire year. So that is one reason why that number is on the lower side. And then it also, in terms of total revenue, has the revenue source of the tax on the property sales of $1 million and over, and then also a city commitment to the fund as well. Next slide. This is just a breakdown in terms of the revenue type by year. You can see the Baltimore City contribution in the green and the tax revenue contribution in blue, which supports the total revenue that's been collected by the fund. And this is through December of 2020, I should note as well. Next slide. This is, we've also, looked at, and one of the key things too that we've had to do since the creation of the fund and since the initial spending plan, which we'll review shortly, is also get a handle and better understanding of the nature of the projected tax revenue, and have had to kind of make some adjustments based on that projection. It is a volatile revenue source that fluctuates throughout the year. So we've also kind of had to do some adjustments in terms of how best to predict and budget for those revenue sources. Next slide, please. This talks a little bit more about the annual report that I mentioned briefly. It is a charter requirement. It will be submitted to the mayor and city council by the commission, and it will cover essentially the fund balances, revenue types, and fund sources, and overall financial position of the fund. Next slide, please. So from the beginning, the fund was created, as Councilwoman Ramos said, with a tremendous amount of community engagement and community involvement, over 13,000 or close to 18,000 signatures, and on the petition, as well as 13,000 valid signatures on the petition for the creation of this fund. The community and the advocates play a significant role and have played a significant role in terms of ensuring fair development and also looking at equitable access to the dollars of the fund and what the fund is supporting, and have had key focus areas on equitable development, the racial equity, perpetual affordability, as well as our older adult population, and then also with an emphasis on city hiring, fair wages, as well as community ownership of property. So we cannot, it has been an excellent working relationship between the community, the advocates, the commission, and the agency working together to come to consensus on the first spending plan that was put in place for the fund. And I look forward to actually working on that process for the next spending plan as we look forward to the future. Next slide, please. So this, all of that input and all of the meetings that we had that I touched on went into the creation of the first proposed spending plan for the Affordable Housing Trust Fund, looking at fiscal years 2020 and 2022. It would be noted that this was the, what you're looking at right now on the screen was essentially the original plan based on higher projections of revenue coming from the tax revenue, which was anticipated at $16 to $18 million annually. As you can see from our previous slides, that revenue has not met those anticipated predictions. So the agency, working with the advocates and the commission members and the commission working groups, got together and needed to look at a revised spending plan to adjust for the revenue coming in. So next slide, we'll start to look at the revised spending plan, and this is what we have been working off of at this time, and it actually looked to focus on fiscal year 20 and fiscal year 21, and we will be looking in the coming months to be putting together the spending plan for fiscal year 22 in the same open, transparent, and community-driven approach to that creation of that spending plan as well. Some items of note: essentially every line item on the spending priority was reduced in the revised spending plan. Some items being reduced on a smaller amount to, I think the highest amount was about a $3 million, just over a $3 million reduction on a specific line item. In this revised spending plan, we also were able to account for assistance during the pandemic. So this also accounts for the one-time $2.75 million support for our homelessness and eviction prevention work in partnership with the Mayor's Office of Children and Family Success, and using those funds to help with the much needed rent and crisis that we've seen across the city as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic. This revised spending plan, definitely takes into consideration the, somewhat volatile and uncertain revenue climate that we talked about, and also less revenue that has been generated from the tax as what was originally predicted to be coming in. And so this spending plan has been kind of the guiding principle in terms of the projects and notice of funding availability that we've put out and have guided where commitments are being made at this time. Next slide, please. So one of the notice of funding availability that was released was our first new construction and preservation of existing rental housing, NOFA. So 4 applicants were awarded funds in that first round. There is a current round open right now for applications. So if anybody has a project, we're accepting applications under the second round of funds for new construction and preservation currently. So we have 4 applicants that were awarded in the first fund. Total amount awarded was just over the $2 million. Those awards support a total of 127 units, with 45 units at 30% AMI and 82 units at 50% AMI and below. The total projects encompass 271 total units, and there's a leveraged amount. So the trust fund funding, as is typically with city funding across the board on affordable housing projects, is typically the last or one of the last sources of funds in to get a development deal kind of over the finish line. And so the trust fund with these awards of $2 million is leveraging at a 44.82 to 1 ratio, which is a pretty hefty ratio on supporting these projects, which is a great data point for us to have. Now, these projects are still in the process of getting to kind of the settlement table. So, some of these you'll be seeing starting construction within the coming year to support these new construction and preservation of existing rental units. Next slide, please. One of the other line items, as you saw on the spending plan, is this older adult housing repair and preservation. The spending plan budget is $3 million. This is going to assist a backlog that we have of over 500 homeowners that need repair assistance with their property. And this is also going to be leveraged with other resources that we have and that we're looking to also leverage with, but supporting other resources and leveraging funds within CDBG as well as city capital funds and other philanthropic funds across the city as well with our nonprofit partners. There's definitely a need for existing support of older adults in their home and the preservation of their properties as a affordable housing unit for them. Next slide, please. One other area of focus and support is the community land trust with the goal of perpetual affordability. We've had several awards so far under this line item and also have 6 submissions that were submitted for the single family homeownership notice of funding specific to land trust, and those submissions are currently in review as of today's hearing. Next slide, please. So this reviews some of the current commitments that we have in terms of what has been funded with money moving kind of what we would say out the door, as well as the other committed funds that fall into some of the other categories that we have. So we have the 2.75 on there is committed for the rental assistance and eviction prevention. The properties that were awarded under the NOFA for new units and preservation of existing units, as well as some of the support for land trust and also for inclusionary housing as well. In the pipeline, we are starting to finalize the senior housing repair work, and so that funding will start moving very, very shortly, as well as we have the community land trust single family home ownership NOFA, where those are in review at this time, and we also have the round 2 of the new construction and preservation of existing units that round 2 is now out. So that shows kind of what is also in the pipeline that we expect to be awarded and also moving here shortly. Next slide. So we do know that we have some future impacting legislation on the trust fund, as well as legislation that just passed. So we have the right to counsel, which adds 1 additional commissioner to the Affordable Housing Trust Fund Commission, and also expands the commission role and some additional annual report oversight. And also we know that Council Bill 21-0004, the Office to End Homelessness, was also reintroduced, and that would look to create a permanent housing voucher program with also support from the trust fund for that office and $1.3 million annually. So those are areas that we have kind of looking to the future, knowing that could impact the trust fund and the makeup of the commission. And with that, we will finish the kind of formal presentation. I do want to say that in terms of some general, we did submit a bill report for the bill, and for general ideas for improving the fund, we think specifically can look at some items around the commission members, as well as priorities and how those would come through the discussions and the meetings and negotiations. We really look at this and have had significant success around consensus building in terms of creating the spending plan and how to move the funds out into the city of Baltimore to support the needs that we have. We also, do have some things to look at in general for improving the fund in terms of potential for increasing the administrative cap. We do have a potential idea or looking at just needing to establish the procedures for allocating the funds to other agencies, and also just thinking about how we leverage the trust funds with the other investments that are being made across the city.
Thank you, Commissioner Kennedy. And just to let you know, the committee hasn't received the report, so or whatever was submitted, it needs to be submitted. Get it to Jennifer Coates, and she will make sure the committee has a copy of
Okay,
what.
I know that we submitted that last week, so I don't know where the I'll check with Stephanie.
Nina,
Yes, Madam Chair. Yes, this is Nina Themos with the Mayor's Office. It should be in Jennifer's inbox now. It was submitted by DHCD on Friday afternoon. I apologize for the delivery.
Thank you. We're now going to move to, well, first I want to mention that 5 o'clock we do have another hearing that's scheduled at 5, and we are basically pressed with time, so we know we have some attendees to get through. At this particular time, does the committee have any questions for Commissioner Kennedy about this update on the Affordable Trust Fund?
I have some questions. Well, I'll let my colleagues ask first.
Anyone else on the committee have questions, or should we just go ahead and let council member?
Yeah, Madam Chair.
Yes, Councilman Dorsey.
Thank you. Hi, Alice. Thanks for your presentation. Have there been any assessment of what we could be doing to increase revenue into the fund? And because I know in looking at your charts, it's just I know that the increased tax that we passed that goes into the fund is only on sales over $1 million, and it's like really interesting that Baltimore saw like an incredibly good year last year for real estate sales in the market in general. Yet I guess we're not seeing the level of $1 million+ sales that was perhaps projected, and I'm wondering whether there shouldn't be some very slight increase on the tax on the rest of these sales as a way of padding this out a little bit. Perhaps not to a degree that anybody feels like it's oppressive, but there certainly are sales going on, and it seems like we could be generating more revenue, just not solely from sales over $1 million. So that's just one thought I'm having. Just in general, is there any thought given to how we can pad this out and get to where we, at one time projected it was going to be?
So, Alice, I can respond to that one. This is Bob Senemy, Budget Director for representing the Department of Finance. So, Councilman, to your point, the reason that the tax was chosen only on transactions over $1 million was because, of course, we wanted to, keep routine transactions from being in the mix there, which, we were afraid would discourage, investment in Baltimore. Our transfer and recordation taxes are already the highest in the state. Transactions over $1 million are now by far the highest tax transactions in the state of Maryland. We have seen some increased activity since the beginning of the pandemic on the residential market, and the residential market generally are the transactions, of course, that are going to fall below $1 million. The commercial market is not doing well, I think, for pretty obvious reasons during COVID-19. Just not as much investment that we're used to seeing in commercial establishments. Mentioned this, earlier today in my presentation on the second quarter budget projections, but we're seeing starting to see a decline in assessed value on commercial properties as well. So the residential market has been strong in the last couple of months, commercial not so much. When we estimated these transactions back a few years ago when we did the bill report, I went back and looked at my old bill report, and in the years when this law was passed, we actually used an average of the prior 3 years, which was fiscal 16 to 18. And in those years, we were averaging about 300 transactions over $1 million in each of those years. What we've seen since then, calendar year 2019 was 204. Calendar 2020 was only 228. So there have been fewer transactions since that time. Our estimate was based on 3 admittedly good years, strong years. But these transactions, of course, are highly tied to, the market environment, the housing market, interest rates, a whole host of things. So they are pretty difficult to predict. And so that's why we've seen some drop off in the revenue. I should also say that in some of those years prior, we've had some enormous transactions that generate a lot of money. So we've had individual transfer or recordation transactions in excess of 200 or $300 million. We haven't seen any of those in the last couple of years. We still occasionally get one for 80 or 100 million or 120 million, but in some of those years we had transactions that were extraordinarily high. And again, those are very difficult, if not impossible, to project.
Thanks, Bob. So, and I'm like totally shooting from the hip here, but
so Councilman Dorsey, just before you finish, just a reminder, there's another hearing that's taking place at 5, which I don't want to interfere, so we're pressed with time so we can move on. So
yeah, I'm not going to take long here.
Thank you.
Bob, if we want BBMR to give us a projection, say, of like some progressive increases on transactions below $1 million. I do not recall offhand what our increases were in these transfer and recordation tax percentages were, but if we wanted to place a smaller increase on properties between 750,000 and $1 million, and a slightly smaller increase on 500 to 750, and some other small increase on 250 to 500. Is there could BBMR develop some revenue projections for something like that if we did want to include residential transactions or other transactions below that $1 million threshold?
The answer is yes. We have raw data on these transactions. I would just say that, a projection would not be an endorsement from us.
Totally understood, but I think it's in our interest, it's in the public's interest to at least avail ourselves of the information and have that. What would you like me to do to follow up on that?
I think just if you could just, just a written request with exactly what you're looking for, and we could see from the data, what we can pull. We do have, for the more recent years, we have some more raw data. Actually, at the time we were working on this, we'd actually shared all of the data for, I believe it was fiscal 17, which was kind of the year previous for all the transactions over $1 million. So if you just want to draft something up and send it to us, we can see what we can come up with.
All right, great. I'm going to follow up with, I'm going to just say it here. Any of the advocates here who are looking for information after this, let's just put our brains together. Thank you.
And Bob, are you, your testimony is representing the Department of Finance?
Yes, and actually, my comments before, in response to Councilman Dorsey's questions, was most of my testimony. So,
okay, please submit anything that has to be submitted to the committee as a whole, and the staff to this committee. Thank you. Okay, thank you. And there was one other agency, if Housing Authority, if they had any last words, and then we'll go back to Councilmember Ramos, and then we'll, I know that there's been some attendees patiently waiting, and you have to be patient, and I'm going down the list and not skipping over people for other people. I know I've been getting people that are demanding to speak. You have to be patient and wait your turn.
Madam Chair, this is Acting Commissioner Kennedy. I did want to say that on behalf of the agency, because the resolution also called for from the commission. So we do have David Bowers, who is chair of the commission, has submitted written comments just before the start of the hearing, but I do want to recognize that those have been submitted. And we do also have with us this evening Matt Hill, who is a member of the commission, and would ask at some point that he have the opportunity to provide comments.
Yes, and we have both of the people you mentioned, we have both of their testimony as a committee. Thank you. Councilmember Ramos, did you want to, this is your floor at the time, for the time.
Did other committee members have question?
No one has their hand raised.
Okay. I was just curious as to, with the additional senior money that's being put together to help seniors with the home repair. You had said that there's a 520, backup. And how many people do you think that $3 million is going to help? Like half of that?
So if we were to leveraging with other resources, we actually are hoping to meet the needs for as many of the 520 as possible. So if we went off of a straight average of $20,000 for support per household, that would be only about 150 properties that would be assisted with the $3 million from the trust fund. But we know that some come in less than 20,000, as well as leveraging with our other resources. So I think that we'll be able to assist as close to that 500 mark that we have with these funds, as well as other leveraged funds.
And I know you just said that you're going through the NOFAs for the land trust. Do you know how many units that's going to be producing?
At this time, I don't have that information because those are in review. So it would be after they come out of review for threshold and other items that we'd have an idea of the number of units for those.
Okay.
Okay. Thanks. And Madam Chair, I realize there's a lot of attendees and I want to hear from all of them. I'm not sure how this hearing right after us was planned, knowing that this was going to last a long time. So maybe the council president's office can work something out with the other chair, because I don't feel like it's fair that we're going to give all these attendees only 20 minutes. So I would ask that the committee staff work with the council president staff to try to figure this out. And then do we have in your annual report, Alice, you'll be able to, excuse me, Commissioner Kennedy, you'll be able to tell us like what the metrics are for success that you all have been working from, because I haven't seen that here, sort of what your measures are.
So the annual report is specific to the financial status of the fund, which is what we went off of based off of what's required in the charter and looking forward to that. We are gathering metrics in terms of number of households assisted, number of units produced, and are tracking that. That's one component on the one slide that I shared with what we're projecting out with the first awards of the NOFA for the preservation and new construction of units. So we are tracking the information, and we will be actually being able to share that publicly as these projects kind of move forward. So as we move for the senior older adult home repair, we will know exactly how many properties we assisted on, what the leverage dollar amount is, and number of household members that we've assisted as well and helped preserve. So we are tracking that information and looking at how best to include that. So at this time too, it's even with the NOFA, it's a projected number of units because they haven't actually been constructed yet.
Right. No, I understood. And you had, the leverage amount too, which is great because that's kind of the point of the whole piece. Madam Chair, I think that's it for me right now, and I can submit the rest of my questions.
Right. And then to your, I guess your statement with time, no, that cannot be arranged, but we can recess and have another work session at another date if you really want to get in. The people that are left to speak when we go through, we can just make their time a minute or so. We had 4 bills, and this is the 4th bill, and you weigh time amounts. I didn't know that there was in our time slots for all committees, there's a 5 o'clock hearing. So, this was our first hearing, and this is the way we have to try to work it out. So on that note, if there's no other questions from the committee, let's just go on and move through and see how close we can get. I want to start at the top. I see a hand. So from this point on, the attendees and people that we want to hear from, you're really going to have to limit your time as quickly as possible. And we'll start with Dan. Hearing nothing from Dan, we'll go down to Matt. No. Dan?
Hi.
Yes, could you please hurry up? And I know you spoke before on another bill. We're time constraint now, so do you have a quick statement?
Yes. I actually didn't. This is the first time I testified, but I'll just be quick. Although I really wish there was much more time to discuss this because we've spent a lot of time kind of defining the problem of affordable housing and rentals here, but we're not really focused on results. And I say that I think we need to separate the great work that the advocates did to put this in place, and now we have to focus on the performance of the government. And right now, we've been doing this since 2016, and there are no units. I have so many questions about why this even needs to happen, since I think most of the advocates who wanted this fund, we now have a mayor who's committed to this. And the problem for the past 4 years is the tail can't wag the dog. I worked for a mayor who didn't want to build any affordable housing. We've stalled for years now, and I'm hoping at some point we actually put a family in an affordable housing unit. But I'm looking at this list of priorities, and my main question is, the priorities of the fund now completely match the priorities of HCD as a whole. We're spreading this money around through to many different priorities. Only $2 million being spent on actually building hard units. I mean, this is mission creep that really needs to be looked at. Why are we not building more housing now? We're spreading a tiny bits of money across multiple groups. I mean, a couple $100,000 to 10 different groups is a lot of money, but it's also nowhere near building actual units of housing or helping people. You know, the inclusion of Perkins Homes, by the way, in the HABC report, which I read online here, I gotta say, I take exception to that because that's a massive federal project. There are private developers at work there. The point of this fund, when I voted yes for it, was to make sure that affordable housing could be built in places other than Harbor East, and that it would that projects that wouldn't get done would get done with the help of this fund. And so including that massive, huge project that's got federal funding, to me, again, this is now just doing HCD's job. And I'm trying to understand where's the affordable housing and when are we going to get it? And why, if we now have a mayor who's committed to this, why do we need to offload the entire policy generation to a committee? Like, you guys, I elected you guys. I voted for Robert and I voted for everybody else. And now why can we not make this policy and build something? Rather than sit on this money for years.
Your testimony is in phrases of questions, and we don't have the complete answers at this time. So what I'd like you to do is submit your questions either to the sponsor or either to the committee, and we will work with the agency to get answers to your questions.
I appreciate that.
No problem. Thank you so much. Moving on to Matt.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Again, Matt Hill. I am a member of the Affordable Housing Trust Fund Commission. I'll be extremely brief. I want to thank Councilwoman Ramos for calling the hearing. I think this is an important topic. I want to recognize Councilman Bullock on the committee, who was the sponsor of the legislation that funded the trust fund. And really, I want to thank the department. You know, I'm usually the first person to run to the sun and criticize any government agency, and I want to thank them for doing some great work here. To Dan's point, it's important that we keep in mind that we have to fully fund our agencies. So the department's been laboring under some very difficult headwinds, and so we need to make sure that they have the funding in order to execute these plans. I just really want to point out some. I think that to Councilwoman Ramos's point, you know, raw numbers of units are important, but it's not the only thing. And there are some really innovative things being done with this trust fund around fair development, around making sure that projects that hire locally, that give apprenticeships, that produce just wages, environmentally sustainable policies. It actually mentions race equity for the first time in an OFA for projects. I mean, these are really good things that the city should continue to do and recognize that intersectionality of housing with other incredibly important issues. The community land trust allocation, that's very innovative and serves a very vital need. Really quickly on the policy, we're talking about helping low-income tenants who do not have access to home ownership become homeowners, or at least that's one use of a land trust. Helping them build equity, and it's a sustainable model. So one study said that 90% of folks in land trusts remain homeowners after 5 years, as opposed to 50% in just market rate housing. So when you talk about the 32,000 renter households that are paying more than 50% of their income toward rent, this is one very key, very concrete producing unit strategy to help advance the goal of making sure people can build equity and do so in a way that's community driven and permanently affordable. I am so tired of the affordability merry-go-round where every 30 or 40 years we're trying to make sure desperately that these projects stay affordable. So lastly, I just want to say I agree with Councilman Dorsey. We really have to fund this fund. We're only getting 7 or 8 million. The projection was up to 13 million. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Matt. Moving down the list, Bill Wells with Housing Authority, did you have a statement to make? I see you raised your hand.
Yes, Madam Chair. I didn't want to take too much time. Our testimony is posted on Legistar as Dan had read it. I did want to point out that the Housing Authority is really pleased that one of the priorities that the Commission made in their list of priorities was to help fund choice neighborhood initiatives. These are initiatives that, as Dan mentioned, are funded in part by the federal government, but at their core look to revitalize and expand affordable housing. We also agree that while we don't have any control at the Housing Authority over the funding of the Affordable Housing Trust Fund, we're in the the thick of the acknowledging the fact that the need for affordable housing in Baltimore far outstrips the available resources, and would concur that there need to be more resources put towards it. We're happy to partner with the Affordable Housing Trust Fund and to have those funds as one of the many layers in the funding that's going to go to the Choice Neighborhoods Initiative. And I won't take up any more time.
Thank you. And as we go down the list with attendees, Nicole Battle.
Excuse me, Madam Chair, I wanted to speak as well as a commissioner.
Excuse,
This is Aletha Joins, the Affordable Housing Trust Fund Commission.
Go ahead.
Thank you. I appreciate you giving me the time to speak. And thank you, Madam Chair, and the rest of the committee. And just as a member of the commission who represents the thousands of residents in the city who struggles to pay their rent and maintain their basic needs in life, and based on the previous discussions that we've had around the previous bills, we all know that there's an immense need for permanently affordable housing in this city. And community land trusts is our proven solution to that need. And it's a model that really puts the people's first and the control of development in the hands of the actual community. And it's also a model that promotes the racial equity in a city that has historically shown a frightening disinvestment and displacement in our communities of color. So I just want to say that. And then lastly, I don't want us to forget that this is the People's Fund. It was the community who demanded this fund be set up in an effort to combat the housing disparities in our city. It was the community who demanded that it be funded. It was the community who decided on its priorities, and it will be the community that will hold us accountable to what we said we're going to use these funds for. So I just highly urge for us to really focus our efforts on increasing the revenue flow so that we can really make an impactful change in our city that so desperately needs it. And that's all I want to say. Thank you for giving me the space to talk.
Thank you. Nicole Battle. Back to you, Nicole Battle. Keisha Gunn. Move it to her. Nicole Battle.
Okay, hello?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. I'm sorry. Good afternoon, Madam Chair. Thank you so much for the opportunity to speak. I'm Nicole Battle, CEO of Govern's Ecumenical Development Corporation. And since 2017, I've been working with the members of Share Baltimore, which includes some of my members that are here today and also those who are being considered for the Community Land Trust funding. These community partners consist of Northeast Housing Initiative, Curtis Bay Community Land Trust, Remington Housing Work Group, Charm City Land Trust, Westport CDC, and Cherry Hill CDC. The three primary goals, we were able to meet with Baltimore City DHCD to ask them to consider a 3-year pilot exploring the community land trust model and its impact in Baltimore City. And our primary goals were to provide 63 new affordable housing units, reducing the number of vacants within these communities by 54 units, to leverage additional funding to increase investment in these 6 communities and to also further educate DHCD, our partners and other community organizations about the community land trust model so that they can implement this program within their respective communities. Thanks to the partners that Councilwoman Ramos noted in her introduction, which includes members of SHARE, we were able to execute an agreement with DHCD in 2018, which as a result of that agreement and $100,000, we were able to create or modify an existing strategy for SHARE members, assisting them in the implementation of the various plans. We were able to create an active and collaborative learning exchange to educate and guide each of our members in the implementation and modification of their various community land trusts. The creation of partnerships with 2 banks that understand and have bought into the CLT model and have mortgage documents that can be used by members who choose to implement community land trusts in their communities. Our members have secured foundation funding and also funding from the legislature to organize their efforts and the stewardship piece within their communities. As a result of the pilot agreement with the city, we were able to leverage over $1.6 million in additional resources to help these various communities. We also encouraged DHCD to start actively researching how the CLT model works, and now they have a consultant who is now or has been able to help them review the applications that were submitted in October. Also, as a result, we were able to start a new community land trust, South Baltimore CLT. From the additional efforts and just from the growth of these organizations, because the funding was used really to for capacity building, 4 of the 6 applicants that submitted applications are part of SHARE. They were able to submit applications for funding in the amount of $3 million, and their total development costs for their projects would leverage about $3.4 million in funding if they were awarded. So again, we are very supportive of the Affordable Housing Trust Fund program, very supportive of the community land trust model. I think this will have a great impact on communities who want to preserve affordable housing within their neighborhoods and also make sure that the residents who live there stay there. And that's all I have to say. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you. John Mobley.
I didn't mean to raise my hand if I did, so.
Okay, thank you. We'll move on to Keisha Gunn. You have a quick statement?
Can you hear me? Yes. Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Chairwoman and Council. I'm also one of the Affordable Housing Trust Fund commissioners, and you know, we're all very well acquainted with Baltimore's legendary history of racially discriminatory housing practices, which have really led to the situation we see every day and which plagues our community. Baltimore pioneered these practices, and they were federally, state, and locally funded and sanctioned. Community land trusts, the C in community land trusts is what we as the commission stand for. So in housing, how do we promote racial equity? And community land trusts may not be the only solution, but they're definitely a part of the solution, which deem to return the land back to the community, which make the effort to give community control in how they live, the quality of their life, and the control is the main thing. From the very beginning, the Affordable Housing Trust Fund process has been nothing but open and transparent. Open meetings, hearings, and we've sought to include, and pretty much we've been founded on community participation. That is how our priorities were set. We heard from the community, we listened to the community, we reflect, and we answer to the community because we are the community. So we really hope that this unconventional approach, which again seeks to address the racial equity issues, seeks to address the sustainability, the permanent affordability, and the community control factor. That is what we're seeking to do. What needs to be addressed is the resources, the monetary resources that will address the issues that have plagued our community for years, for decades, and for generations. So thank you for your time, and I hope we can really move forward and looking for some innovative ways to create more revenue. That is the issue. Thank you.
If that's how you want, I'm happy to do whatever you want. So
Okay. Hold on, please.
I do want to hear people's voices. I think that's
Right.
important.
So, for the committee and the attendees, as I kind of stated earlier, this committee hearing, we have time slots for each committee, and ours started at 2. This was our first hearing ever for the start of the session, really. And there is a 5 o'clock slot that also has a hearing that's also scheduled to be on. There's going to be a conflict. So we have to stop at 5. So, and we want to hear all the testimony and all the data. And I'm proposing to the council that we don't take a vote on this bill, and we have we schedule a work session day just for this, to finish at least this testimony and finish up on this resolution, so we can have a more thorough review and hear all the testimony. Because as we know, this is a very important issue. Do I have any comments from the sponsor of the bill and member of the committee or other committee members? Can we move to a work session to move this forward, because we now are into 5 o'clock and it's not fair to the other committee that's scheduled?
Thanks, Madam Chair. Having a broader discussion would be great.
So here's what we're going to do. Of course, we apologize to the attendees that still have to speak. We do want to hear you. You are going to speak. We're just going to recess and reschedule and have a work session and get back to where we started from. We'll make an announcement with that as soon as we can. Any other comments from the committee?
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
So at this point, again, apologize. I know there's about 8 more attendees that would like to speak. And I know Councilwoman Ramos had some more questions. So we're going to set up a continued work session again to continue with this conversation. And this meeting is now in recess. Everyone be safe. Take care.
Madam Chair.